The Tanker Mystery, Iran's hidden message to the East. So, picture a violent military strike in the Strait of Hormuz. Looks like pure chaotic aggression, right? Well, what if I told you the source material actually frames it as a highly calculated geopolitical masterstroke? In today's explainer, we're diving into a literal locked room mystery on the open seas. And as we'll see from the analysis, this wasn't some random attack aimed at the West. No, this was a very specific message, carefully addressed to Moscow and Beijing. Let's get right into it.
Okay, to really peel back the layers here, we have to look at the timeline of recent escalations. First, we had a prior strike in the Strait, which was immediately followed by massive American retaliation across, get this, 140 different Iranian targets. Then, bam, July 13th hits. 2 UAE tankers are struck in the Strait of Hormuz, and that prompts a full U.S. blockade of Iranian ports. Now, on the surface, the story kind of seems to write itself, doesn't it?
I mean, we've all heard the mainstream narrative. Iran is lashing out. Iran is escalating. Iran is desperate. It's everywhere. But here's the thing. Reading the situation as mere desperation, the analysis shows it's not just a shallow take, it's actually dangerously wrong. Because if we're only focusing on the loud noise of the explosions, we are totally missing the incredibly precise strategy driving them. Which brings us to the ultimate question of this whole geopolitical detective story. Why target 2 Emirati oil tankers? Out of all the possible targets in the region, why did Tehran choose those 2 specific ships? The source argues that once you answer this, the entire global chessboard suddenly makes a whole lot of sense. To figure this out, we have to consider Iran's unused arsenal. We're talking coastal missile batteries, drone swarms, fast attack boats, naval mines. I mean, they have spent 20 years perfecting this stuff. If they genuinely just wanted to cause widespread chaos for America or Israel, they literally had the assets and the proxies positioned everywhere to do exactly that. So the fact that they spared all those other assets, it proves that hitting those specific UAE tankers was a surgical, deliberate choice. And the motive for that surgical choice? It actually traces back to a pretty ruthless internal power shift in Tehran following the supreme leader's death. Basically, the pragmatist faction, the guys who wanted negotiations and wanted to protect Gulf relationships, they lost. The hardline core of the Revolutionary Guard took complete control. And they look at war as an opportunity. They've decided Iran's future isn't with the West at all. They are pivoting east to Russia and China. So hitting a Gulf neighbor's tanker, that was a brutal, flashing neon sign saying the region is now secondary to this brand new global alignment. But here's the catch. Executing a massive pivot like that requires leverage, and their leverage is entirely about geography. Think about the Strait of Hormuz for a second. It's only 33 kilometers wide at its tightest point. Yet an absolutely staggering 1/5 of all the oil consumed on the entire planet flows through this single narrow gap every single day. 1/5. Controlling a choke point like that is the ultimate trump card. But the question is, a trump card over whom? Well, look at the destination of the oil flowing through the Strait of Hormuz. This is the surprising reality of that leverage. The vast majority of this oil isn't going to the US or Europe, not even close. It's going east. China is pulling a massive percentage of its imported crude right through here. India, Japan, South Korea, they completely depend on it. So the Strait of Hormuz isn't really a Western lifeline. It's an Asian artery, and it's feeding the industrial heart of the exact countries Iran is currently courting. So put all this together. By hitting a U.S. allies tanker but leaving that vast fleet of Asian oil completely untouched, Iran wasn't just making a blind threat. The analysis frames this as a highly sophisticated, albeit violent, sales pitch to Beijing and Moscow. It's basically saying, look how much power we hold, and we are choosing to protect you. Think of it as, extreme customer service. They are sending a crystal clear message. We can strangle the global oil market whenever we want, but we're choosing restraint for you. Our missiles are pointed at America's friends, not yours. Ride with us, and this artery stays open. And it wasn't just a political signal either. Let's look at the oil price favor. This was an immediate, tangible financial favor. Step 1, a precisely calibrated strike lands, just loud enough to spook the market. Step 2, immediately global crude prices spike. And step 3, who profits from that instantly? Russia. Those higher oil prices literally pour cash directly into the Russian treasury, which helps fund their heavily sanctioned war effort. And let's be real, a favor with a massive dollar value attached builds alliances way faster than any diplomatic treaty ever could. Because Iran knows they can't win a straight conventional war against the United States. No way. Instead, their entire survival strategy revolves around creating undeniable strategic value. Think about it. a defiant Iran secures Russia's vital southern trade corridor, keeping it away from Western navies. It protects China's eastern energy flows. And, crucially, it keeps American forces permanently tied down in the Gulf. The goal isn't military victory over America. It's to become so absolutely crucial to the anti-Western bloc that Beijing and Moscow literally cannot afford to let them fall. So, to break down Iran's three-pronged message based on the explainer's analysis, that single surgical strike delivered three totally distinct, highly calculated messages to three completely different audiences all at once. To Russia, the message is, we increase your oil revenue and keep your southern corridor open. To China, we keep your energy flowing east and keep America pinned down. And to the Gulf states, American protection is thinner than you thought. Guys, that is not desperation. That is meticulous, strategic design.
So where does this leave us? Well, according to the source material, there's exactly what to watch for next. Specifically, three critical ripple effects we need to actively monitor in the coming months as this new global order really starts to take shape: material support, the blockade squeeze, and Gulf hedging. First up, we need to watch Moscow and Beijing for a shift from diplomatic cover to material support. Up until now, they've offered diplomatic cover, the standard statements of concern, calls for restraint aimed at Washington. But the real test? That's material support. We need to be watching for quiet shipments of defense technology and components, moving through those eastern and southern corridors where Western navies aren't patrolling. If Iran's violent audition actually worked, the real payoff is going to arrive very quietly. Second, there is a massive, hidden risk in the chain of pressures from the U.S. response. The U.S. has reinstated a blockade of Iranian ports. But a blockade is a pretty blunt instrument, right? Squeezing those ports naturally squeezes the buyers of that oil, and the biggest buyer is China. So an American move against Tehran inadvertently touches Beijing directly. This really threatens to pull a superpower straight off the sidelines and directly onto the geopolitical battlefield. And third, we absolutely have to watch the Gulf states. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE build their modern economies on the baseline assumption of U.S. security guarantees. But as they watch these incredibly precise strikes happen right off their own coasts, they are quietly being forced to ask a once unthinkable question. If the American umbrella cannot keep our tankers safe, do we need to hedge? Do they need to start making their own arrangements directly with Beijing? Every single strike accelerates this exact recalculation. Which brings us to the final, massive, unresolved question of this whole explainer. This conflict, it isn't just about Iran anymore. It's about the shifting tectonic plates of the emerging global order. Iran has made a highly calculated, violent pitch to prove they are indispensable. So looking at the board today, will Russia and China accept Iran's pitch and fully integrate Tehran into their alliance? Or will they keep them at arm's length because the risk is just too high? The answer to that won't just dictate the next news cycle, it's probably going to define the rest of this decade.